So this is a session on SRM futures, and it's emphasizing Failback, call it Failback and more. And I'll talk about it a little more, but there's other SRM sessions around HBR and stuff that hopefully you got to see. What we're going to concentrate on today is some of the new features that are happening on our development boxes back home, basically. So, standard disclaimer slide. I'll be showing a bunch of screenshots, and we have a demo of the product. Again, all this stuff is based on the versions we're actually working on right now, so it's not released and not announced, and therefore, by the time it ships, things could change. You all know how that goes, hopefully. So there have been a bunch of sessions about disaster recovery, and there's a few of them I kind of want to point out. So there are several about using the current version of SRM, and today I'm going to be mostly concentrating on a future version, and not necessarily talking very much about the current version. So if you're trying to learn more about the current version of SRM, this is going to be interesting, but to really understand how it works today and kind of the fundamentals of the product, and to kind of go into a little more more overview stuff. I'll do a quick overview. You should review these sessions if you missed them. In a couple weeks, they should all be available on vmworld.com. The other one that, just because we've been getting questions during the week, the other one that I guess I want to talk about is the HBR one. There are actually two new features coming out in the next version of Site Recovery Manager, and one is all about host-based replication, which is a low-cost way to kind of get VMs from one site to another. I'm going to concentrate on the SAN one, just to kind of keep the whole thing to fit within an hour. So go see that. So my plan today is to give a quick overview of what SRM is, and then I'm going to walk through how you set up SRM from the beginning all the way up to ready to run your tests and recoveries, and then talk about the two new workflows that we're adding to SRM. Then Ilya Langrev is going to come up, and I guess I should have introduced you in the beginning, but will come up and give a demo recording, and talk through it, so you can actually see how the flow works and how everything fits together that I'm going to talk about. Then we'll have some time for questions at the end. If you've been to an SRM presentation, you've seen this slide. So Site Recovery Manager was started shipping in 2008, and increasing number of vSphere customers are deploying it as for business continuity and disaster recovery. It's actually one of the fastest growing solutions VMware's ever had in year-over-year sales and stuff like that. Essentially, it's a DR management and an automation tool to turn, to script the entire disaster recovery process. Our main competition, in a lot of cases, are manual runbooks, where literally each server in your data center, there's a description of it, either electronically or on paper, that describes how you'd rebuild that in another site in the case of a disaster. Site Recovery automates that whole thing, and because it's automated, it allows you to easily test the whole thing as well. So you can verify that that your disaster recovery solution is going to work. I guess much easier. Sorry, kind of going off script. So, one more thing about this slide. Another thing that I want to cover is that an important thing about the way SRM works, there are several options, but the one that it's really designed to work best in is to have two data centers that are each protecting each other. The idea is that you can save a little bit of excess capacity on each vCenter server, and then in the event of a disaster, you bring all the workloads from one over the other, and they're each protecting each other, so your entire data center as a unit is protected. Okay, let's go on to the walkthrough. again, I'm going to be talking about the future stuff, so hopefully you got to a lab or earlier in the week I was like, go to the labs to see what the current version is, because it won't look like this. So here we are with the new version. It looks very similar to vCenter, just kind of like you'd expect. In Site Recovery Manager, though, we protect more things than just VMs. We have more kinds of objects, basically, than just VMs. I should have warned everyone to sit closely. So there's a little control down here to kind of talk about each of the different types of objects that you set up for recovery. This one is the Sites tab, and sites are, when you first install the product, you choose which two vCenter servers you're going to protect, and you pair them together. And you can see, you give the credentials for each one, so that then as changes happen in the inventories, those changes are sent immediately over to the other side, so if a disaster happens, we can recreate it exactly how it was. The next set of objects that you set up are the array managers. And one of the things that you'll notice is that, like before, both sites were on the same pane of glass. And so that's one of the new improvements we've made in this version, is that you can configure both sides from the single pane of glass. So here you can configure both array managers, all the arrays on each side for each direction, all in one place. This is an area that we so this is an area that we really redesigned. One of the things that we've done in SRM is expanded the interfaces that SRM uses to talk to the vendors. And so this is the place now where we try to pass that information on to you. For instance, you can, in the summary screen, you can see what version you have, whether the connection to the array is up and running, that they're up and connected, and just kind of get a quick overview. So that interface between the storage and SRM, we call the Storage Replication Adapter, or the SRA, throughout this screen. And so after you can set up an adapter for every type of storage you have in your data center. So here, after you set up a couple of them, and you can kind of get a quick overview again of what version it is, a link to actually go and make sure you get to the latest version, what's being supported. And you'll be able to see all of them here. Let's see. So so after you've installed the SRAs and configured them to talk to your particular appliance, then you can go and see all of the devices that SRM sees. It will go out and discover all the replicated LUNs and present them here. You can see how SRM is seeing your storage. So here's the LUNs, the LUNs that are actually presented, the data stores as they appear in VC, or consistency groups if there are any, and if you've already done a protection, then you can see that as well here. SANs are a fairly complex piece of software, and what we found is that small changes from the admin console can kind of have drastic effects on how SRM sees your storage, or can change replication in ways that you may not notice right away. So this interface kind of gives us a first place to go to diagnose any sort of storage items, and so that's going to be a great help to anyone who's experienced any of those problems. After you set up all the LUNs, the next step is to go and create protection groups. So a protection group represents the smallest group of VMs that have to be recovered together, basically. Since usually it might not always be one-to-one with your LUNs. If you've got VMs or data stores that span multiple LUNs, or you've got LUNs that are tied together through consistency groups, then those groups of LUNs will represent a protection group because they all have to be brought over at the same time. From this screen here is kind of a quick summary screen. One of the things we added is an ability to organize them into folders. We looked at different ways to kind of automate the creation of the folders, maybe through the sites and through a bunch of different things, but through talking to the customers, it's like every customer had a different way that they wanted it to be organized. So you can basically, you have free folder creation. You can organize it by whether it's like business group or which array or group of storage that you want it to do, which direction it's supposed to go. It helps you see, organize all those protection groups, because the protection groups that you see are going both directions now. So this particular one here, PG01, is a protected group out in Copenhagen that's being recovered here, and I'll kind of keep following that through as I go through my screen slides. Let's see. So, okay, this one intentionally breaks all the PowerPoint rules because the point of this slide is scalability. A protection group contains all the VMs that are protected together, and so one of the things that we've really drastically improved in the next version is the scalability of it all. Basically to match a lot of the scalability improvements that have been happening in the vSphere platform. So it's easy to have hundreds of VMs that might all end up in a single protection group, and they could all be tabulated here, and if there are any problems with any of those VMs, either because they've been configured since protection or something's up with the storage, then those errors will all show up here in a status column, and you can kind of quickly go and diagnose problems. I mean, the whole point of disaster recovery is around the test and the diagnosing of problems. It seems because the VMs are all working fine. I don't know. After you've defined all your protection groups, the next step is to create the recovery plans. So again, the recovery plans are visible in both directions, and it's all within that single pane of glass. So you can go directly from working on your protection groups to working on your recovery plans. And in this this is like the summary view for a recovery plan, kind of gives an overview. The things you can see are that what the plan status is, if it's ready to be tested, or if it's in the middle of a test, or if some of its protection groups are in use for other things. And you can see its direction. So again, since this is built on that earlier protection group, this recovery plan has the same direction, and it's protecting from Copenhagen to recovery site, to San Francisco. And you can also see that the two sites are still connected right now. We also added an easy place to go and get a summary of the last operation. So you can see what the last operation was, in this case a test, who ran it, how long it took, and whether it was successful or not. And you can also get this from a history screen, but this will start to give you a pattern to determine the RTO for when you run this plan. The last little bit over here is a pie chart that we end up using to summarize the VM status during a bunch of operations, and you'll see that again after we start running some tests. So with protection groups covering hundreds and hundreds of VMs, and recovery plans having possibly hundreds of protection groups, let me see. That makes a lot of VMs that can happen in a single recovery plan. So we kind of have come up with a more sophisticated way to set a startup order. In the current version, we do let you set the order the VMs are going to start. But when you have thousands, just setting a linear order isn't quite enough. So we have groups, which is similar to today, and the groups give you a quick way to kind of make sure the infrastructure VMs, like your database or your Exchange servers, are up before other VMs that may require them, like the app servers and stuff that are in your data center. But sometimes VMs have more dependencies, maybe within a group. And rather than creating more and more groups, what we do is you can also specify individual dependencies, which is kind of represented by this arrow. The idea here, and why it's why we wanted to do it this way, is it's around our pipelining. And anytime we spend waiting for a group to finish and not working on the next group is basically adding to the RTO. And so this system is a way to kind of allow us to maximize our pipelining and get very small RTOs. And it's been working great in that, for some of our larger tests and stuff, we're finding the RTOs are like halved from the current version. So let's see. So besides groups and dependencies, every VM has a group of, or has a whole range of different settings. Some of them that are here are timeouts for power on and power off. That's important because if a VM is running tools, it's fairly easy to figure out that it's finished booting and it's time to start the next VM in the sequence. But if it doesn't, then every VM is a little bit different, and so we allow you to set those, the times to wait before starting VMs that come after. And the same for power off. The first part of a failover involves powering off all the VMs, and so you can set timeouts for that as well. One of the other big settings here this slide brings up is steps that you can run, callouts we call them, before and after the VM is doing its final power on. So my favorite example of the use of a callout script is to do automated verification of your recovery. So for instance, it's easy to write a script that will verify that your web servers are able to respond to requests on port 80. And so now, when you run your test, and when you run your failover as well, you've got an automated verification that's built right into the runbook, basically, that has verified that VM. You don't have to go manually log in or do any of that stuff. We've also, in this version, made it easier to run those scripts inside the VM. You can do it today, but it's just a lot easier in this. We've kind of optimized for that case. Another recovery setting that we spent a bunch of time working on is IP customization. So besides the checkbox items of making it faster and supporting IPv6, we've done a bunch of work around the usability of them and pulled the interface for how you configure and set and change them tighter into the SRM interface. That makes it easier to do certain things, like in this view, where I'm just comparing all of the settings on a single NIC, or if in a tabulated view, I can look at how the IP settings are changing as workloads go from one site to the other. I didn't show that one because I didn't want another one of those iStrain slides. I figured one was enough. So let's see. So now, actually, I've kind of shown the whole configuration of SRM. We had the site set up. We set up the storage. From the storage, we created protection groups and recovery plans. And then we were able to tweak all the settings we needed on every VM in the recovery to make it all work. And at this point, given some tests and other things that I should run, I'm protected. If a disaster happens at the site A from that early slide, I can bring all those VMs up and to the second side. But let's see. Right. So, but in the next version, we're supporting 2 additional workflows. And the first one that I want to talk about is planned failover. So if the sites are connected when I'm doing a failover, it's probably because I know that a disaster is about to happen. This kind of goes towards the idea of disaster avoidance. We have a customer in Texas that what they do is they watch hurricanes coming off the Gulf, and they've got 2 data centers in different, along the coast, but in different parts of Texas. So depending on where that hurricane is tracking, they will, using SRM today, move the data center, away from the eye of the hurricane. And that was the kind of scenario and workflow that we had in mind when we are improving it by pulling it into SRM and making it a fully supported workflow. What planned failover does is it helps go through the whole process and make sure no data gets lost during the migration. It starts out the same way as the current failover. We power off all the VMs at site A. And now we know that everything has been written to the disk. So we go and initiate a synchronization at the array level and wait for that to finish. As soon as it's finished and we've got all those bits over, then we can go and swap the personality of the LUNs, present them to the ESX hosts on the other site, and then start powering on those VMs. The other thing that we're doing that doesn't really show up on a slide very well is that we're watching the whole process along the way, and if we run into any problems, we'll try to stand back and stop and let you go fix those problems, and then just like you do in SRM today, you run the recovery plan again. And when you run a recovery plan a second time, it'll skip over the steps it's already done and then just keep working on the steps that are remaining. So that's kind of a planned failover. Let's see. So since this is a futures talk, testing. Sorry. Since this is a futures talk, I'll kind of run you through like what the UI looks like that. So I've highlighted the recovery button, and when you press the recovery button, you get a wizard, which kind of is going to walk you through this whole process. Running a recovery is a big event because you're actually shutting down those workloads on the primary side. So we want to make sure that you understand exactly what's going to happen, and we've kind of try to give you the most information, everything you need to know before you do it. So we confirm that you're running the plan you think you're running, and it's going from one direction to the other, that it's got the right number of VMs. Whether you want it to involve the synchronization or not, of course that's not an option during a disaster, but if the sites are up and running, kind of assuming you want to do a planned migration mode. We'll also walk you through if there are any outstanding warnings going on the protection side or the recovery side, kind of highlight those to you so that you have the option to go fix them before you run the recovery plan. Or you can just run the recovery plan and let it do best effort. Once you're running the recovery, you come back to the summary screen and you'll see that all the VMs are in the process of being running. And in this case, 62 of the VMs have been successfully recovered, but a couple of them had warnings. And so you want to go back and kind of see what those warnings were to make sure that it doesn't affect anything. If they were errors, they would have, we call those out and we would stop the recovery of that particular VM. But warnings are smaller issues that probably aren't a problem. In order to see what's going on during the recovery, we still show you every step that we do. So to run a recovery, to move a VM from one site to the other involves, depending on IP customization and what operating system you're on, around 20 different steps. And so we highlight each of those steps and show you at a very detailed level exactly what is happening and has happened. Again, to handle the troubleshooting issues. So if something goes wrong, you can tell exactly where it is and how to go fix it. Once you got the recovery, you've got your big green circle on the right. Everything's running over on Copenhagen, and everything's been shut down on San Francisco, or other way around. Everything's running in San Francisco and shut down in Copenhagen. You're ready to go. This is now the halfway point, and as the title of the presentation around Failback goes, the other workflow is what comes next. So we call it Reprotect, and it's basically the first step to doing a failback. That what is commonly called failback is really the failover that happens after you've done this Reprotect step and everything's ready to go the other way. Let's see if I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So this is kind of a picture of where we were at the end of recovery. All of our workloads are running over on Site B, and Site A is dark. So the first thing we do is we start the replication going back and reverse it to start replicating back the other way, and make sure that we're getting that data back over to Site A. The other part that we have to do is create all the placeholder VMs that on Site A. While we were running the recovery, the storage went out underneath those VMs, so they were just made inaccessible for a short time. something I did skip is that before you run Reprotect, your setup is basically that you have brought all your workloads over to Site B, and on Site A, though, you still have an archive copy of what it was just before the disaster. And and so we go through the interface. The interface, again, is walking you through it because this is a step that you can't undo because we're going to wipe away that archive copy when you start the Reprotect. And so we, again, kind of carefully walk you through the Reprotect and make sure you understand what's going on. Let's see. Just like with all the other operations, we'll also show, we show you step by step, so it's all the same. And now finally, when Reprotect is complete, you'll notice that the protected site is now San Francisco, where all the workloads were, and the recovery site is back to Copenhagen. At this point, I'm ready to run a test and make sure that Copenhagen is ready to receive all of those workloads. I mean, if there was just a disaster, which is why I ran this, it's very likely that something might not be quite right. So running a test would verify that all the hosts, enough hosts were there, your capacity was high enough, your networks were all working. You can verify all of the VMs back in Copenhagen and have a good confidence that then during the next maintenance window, you could shut down the VMs in San Francisco and move everything back to kind of where it belongs, back home. So you'd run that test. I guess I just have a slide for it, even though I talked too fast for it. Testing is a real important part of the disaster recovery plan. Just having the data to the other side is kind of halfway there, but knowing that you can actually get those VMs up and running quickly in a predictable RTO is really what we think is the key. So that's most of the slides that I had, but there were a few things that basically I wanted to talk about that I couldn't fit in slides. One is the improvements that we're making in Site Recovery Manager around that pipeline. I kind of hinted at it when we're talking about the recovery priority groups. But we're also we've worked with the vCenter platform and come up with more ways to pipeline through our whole process. And actually, in certain tests, we're seeing up to 2 to 5x improvement in the RTOs as we're recovering hundreds of inventories. It's early in the development process, so it's no guarantees about how that's going to work out, but it's been very encouraging. The next two are kind of related in that we've made improvements about working with other solutions that are already in your data center. So the second bullet is about that we're able to now preserve the VM identity as you go through tests and recoveries and failovers and reprotects. So there's still a separate VM at both virtual centers, but that VM stays constant. So solutions that are looking at VMs like performance data or chargeback will keep a common reference even if you're doing tests and failovers. And so that's a great feature. The other half is around SRM being able to be called by other solutions. So we've added a bunch more external APIs in the next version that will allow SRM to work like what I kind of call as the main course, whether it's the guy controlling all of your disaster recovery, and through the script system you're going out and talking to other pieces, or whether it's an ingredient and actually some other tool is in charge and actually initiating recovery plans and protecting and doing the automatically protecting VMs and things you need to do, basically like that. The last bullet is around capturing all of the information around every operation we run. We keep all of the data around what the operation was, who did it, how long it took, all of the detailed information for each of the steps. So we have a complete record then of everything that you've done and all the tests that you've done as kind of an audit history. And that audit history is preserved on both sides, so that even if one site goes down, you can still see that I was running tests, every day for the last year on the Copenhagen site before it went down. So it probably wasn't my fault, someone else's. Okay, that was kind of the overview of the slides, and now I'll introduce Ilya, or let him introduce himself.
Yes, hi, I'm Ilya Languev. I'm a software engineer working with Glenn on the SRM product, and I'm going to go and show you a recording of a demo going through the workflows which Glenn presented in his slides. And I have a few slides of my own which basically describe what the demo is about. And in my configuration, I have primary site A, which initially is going to be the protected site, and secondary site B is going to be the recovery site for this configuration. And in the first part of the demo, I'm going to configure protection of site A with site B. In the second workflow, I will run a planned failover or planned recovery of site A to site B. And once I have my workloads moved from site A to site B, I will configure the protection to go in the opposite direction. I will reprotect site B with site A. And I will run recovery again. And I will bring my workloads back where they were in the beginning. And to close the cycle, I will configure protection again by running the Reprotect workflow. And once again, I will have my workloads running on site A protected by virtual infrastructure on site B. And at the end, I will run a test workflow, and I'll demonstrate my VMs running both on site A, and I'll have test VMs running on site B. And this is a product still in development. I noticed that some of the screenshots Glenn had in his presentation are different from my video. So things are changing, features come and go. And you should be waiting for the real release to evaluate the functionality. I think mine is more recent, yes, assuming I synced. Okay, and for this demo, I already configured SRM on two sites, and I paired these two sites, and on each of the sites, I have a Dell Equalogic array set up with async replication configured between the two sites. And I have a couple LANs replicated, and the VMs I'm protecting are going to reside on these LANs. As a first step, I'm creating a SRM protection group, and this protection group is going to be associated with the data stores which use the replicated LANs. There's only one data store. There could be multiple. Okay, now I have my protection group created, and now I'm going to finalize protection configuration for the two VMs which reside on the data store, which uses the LANs replicated from site A to site B. Once protection is configured, I'm going to create a recovery plan. And recovery plan orchestrates all aspects of failover process and reprotect process between sites. Recovery plan is associated with the protection group I just created. There are two VMs in my recovery plan because there are two VMs in the protection group are associated with the recovery plan. As a first workflow, I'm going to run recovery from primary to secondary. Both sites are up, so this is going to be a planned failover where we will preserve all data between the sites. Okay. Now recovery is running, and as a first step, as Glenn was describing in his presentation, we are instructing the array to synchronize the storage between the sites. And depending on how much data were written to the devices since the last sync, this step can take a long time. But the good part is that while the synchronization is going on, the production VM is still working. Your servers are still working and in production. And of course, if that would be a non-planned failover, this step wouldn't be performed. Once the storage is synced up, we are powering off the VMs. This is taking down the production servers and taking them out of production. And once the VMs are powered off, we go ahead and do another sync to make sure that the data which these VMs written to the disks while they were powering down is also synced up from primary side to the secondary side. Hopefully this step is going to be quick because VMs are not going to write that much in the short period of time which elapsed since the sync we did before we powered them down. Next, we do what Glenn referred to as an identity swap. We stop replication between primary and secondary site. We make the storage device readable, read-only on the primary side, and we make it writable on the secondary, on the recovery side. As soon as storage device becomes writable, ESX starts seeing the recovered data store. And once the ESX server on the recovery side sees the data store, we can start powering up the VMs on side B, effectively accomplishing the failover. I am not doing re-IPing of these VMs for this demo. So I am demonstrating that VMs are powering up on the secondary side. After power-ups are complete, the entire recovery workflow is complete, and we accomplish the failover, planned failover of VMs from site A to site B. Now, I want to go ahead and reprotect my current production site B with virtual infrastructure on site A. And to do that, I am clicking this Reprotect button, and SRM is going to run the Reprotect workflow. And configuring initial protection configuration may require some effort to set up the inventory mapping between the two sites, but hopefully Reprotect is a single-click operation. If the virtual infrastructure on site A didn't change, Reprotect should just work by clicking the Reprotect button and running the Reprotect workflow. And in the course of this workflow, we change the configuration of the storage arrays. We configure application to go in the opposite direction. This time, they're going from site B to site A. And we finalize configuration of some of our internal data structures. And once this is done, we force storage synchronization to make sure that all the changes which were written to the storage devices on side B since the previous failover are carried over to the new site, new recovery site, side B. And once Reprotect is done, we have our secondary site protected by our original primary site. So we have replication set up in the opposite direction, and we have VMs running on secondary protected by virtual infrastructure on primary. As the next step, I'm running recovery again. So I'm failing over from secondary back to primary. And I unchecked the synchronized storage checkbox. So in effect, this is not a planned failover in a sense that I'm not synchronizing the storage changes from site B to site A. And SRM skips the storage synchronization steps, it powered off VMs right away, and proceeded with the original steps, with the same steps we are doing during planned failover to swap the storage device identity and to surface the failed overruns on the new recovery site, which in this case is primary, site A. Once the VMs are powered up, I have my workloads back on the primary side, but I don't have protection configured for my VMs in order to close the cycle and have VMs running on primary be protected by the secondary again. I'll have to run Reprotect workflow one more time. And I'm running Reprotect workflow once again. And SRM instructs arrays to change the direction of replication one more time. This time replication will go from primary back to secondary. And once arrays are configured, SRM configures its internal protection configuration to reflect the change in the replication direction and to go from primary to secondary. And at the end, we are going to synchronize the storage one more time. So after this step, we completed the entire big cycle. We now have VMs running on the primary side, and our primary side is protected by the virtual infrastructure on the secondary. And in the course of this entire workflow, I did 2 real failovers. I powered off VMs on the current protected side, and I brought them up on the recovery side. Instead of doing a real failover, I can do a test failover. I can bring up recovered VMs on the secondary side without powering them off on the primary. And as the next workflow, I'm going to run the test.
Do you want to use this time to maybe answer questions? Or?
Yeah, let me wrap up the test workflow, and then I think we'll have time for questions. And the test workflow is very similar to the real recovery workflow, except we don't stop the replication between the sites. And instead of swapping personality of a storage device, and make it switch from side to side, we surface a second copy of a storage device on the secondary side. We instruct the storage array to create a writable snapshot, which shows up as another storage device on the ES axis on the secondary side. As soon as ESX can see the data store, we can power up the VMs, and these test VMs are powered up without powering off VMs on the primary side. And the VMs are connected to the test network and isolated from the production network by default. And once you're satisfied with the test results, you can see that your VMs are running correctly. You can clean up the test infrastructure by running a separate cleanup workflow, which in this demo I'm going to do in a second. And this would be the end of the demo, and we should have some time for the questions.
So yeah, we'll start over there on the left.
Let's be available this year.
Yeah. So it's future. So that means I think that we're showing it here, which means it's within a year. But no, we don't really have a date set. Sorry. Good question though. Any other questions? Okay, we'll start in the middle. Go.
When you're doing storage replication, do you need special modules like link into different brands of storage? Or is that doing some magic kind of VMware?
Okay, so the question is about if you're working with different storage vendors on arrays underneath, do you need special connections? And yeah, so basically those storage replication adapters is what SRM uses to talk to the storage. That's its only interface, basically. If you're talking to the storage, there's no, we're not using anything else that's special inside the vSphere. So we support something like over 20 different arrays from 15 or more different vendors. And they represent basically a pretty huge portion of the storage market that's actually connected to vSphere. So hopefully any storage you're using that has replication would have those arrays already.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there was a question over here.
Well, I have two now.
Sure.
Follow-up on this. Will the storage vendors be releasing their updated SRAs in concurrent to the release of this one?
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, part of the reason why this is looking so good is because it's important to be able to qualify all of those arrays. And so, even though the release is still a little ways away, we're giving the vendors that time. So yes, they will be.
Thank you. And you've shown us new features and a new interface for SRM.
Yeah.
Have you taken anything out?
So the question is, have we taken anything out? Can you think of anything? I don't. Sure. Here, what is another SRM engineer in the audience? I'll have to repeat it though.
Mass IP customization, it has to actually change because we no longer have to go do customization specifications for everything. We actually do it.
Yeah, okay.
So you could argue that we took out that feature by replacing it with something that
Better. Yeah.
So anything I'm used to in SRM today, other than
Definitely. I think so. Just so that it's on the mic. Everything that you are used to is still all there, and really we have just tried to improve it and just add features. So no, I can't think of anything we've removed. In front.
one of the other SRA or SRM they were saying the SRAs are due to go away in the not too distant future. Any play with this?
So I'm not sure exactly where you heard. The question was, are SRAs going to go away in the future? Let's see. In a grand sense, it would be great if there was a common API that was standard-based that we would all use. And I think that VMware is trying to encourage such a standard if it was, to be developed. It wouldn't necessarily, it would have to come from, I think, the storage vendors. SRAs are is the main way that SRM is going to continue to work with storage for the foreseeable future.
We have a couple different other APIs.
Yeah, or you maybe HPR, is that, so, okay. Okay.
So I know we had a session on interacting with the storage arrays via SCSI commands to do things like cloning portions of the data from one LAN to another. This is one series of APIs we have. We also have a different kind of API which allows us to find out the information about the array features. And we have SRAs. And we are having discussions about consolidating these APIs, but it's it's beyond futures. And for the foreseeable future, SRAs stay. And the vendors are working on implementing new SRA spec for this version of SRM.
Okay. Yep, I'll just work back this way. So you go ahead, and then.
Two questions. First one, what's the difference between Failover for SRM4?
Yeah. Okay, so the question is about how priorities are different than the dependencies in this version. And they're similar. So SRM4 does have actually priorities. There are 3 of them, high, medium, low, or different names. But and this one we added a few more and but the dependencies, what the dependencies are covering is that in SRM4 we let you order the VMs within a group. That it turns out when we're trying to start up hundreds of VMs at the same time, because you've got a lot of hosts, that ordering isn't a strict enough, doesn't help us create that graph well enough, and actually it doesn't represent the actual dependencies that there are between VMs. So this is kind of a more strict way to define those. Yeah, and so we can start more and more in parallel. It's about that pipelining thing.
Second question, I will for VMC.
Okay.
One of our is the countdown, which basically takes snapshots forever.
Yes.
Without SRM, I could have recovered to, let's say, 2 hours from the last time I wanted. So say I've got a corruption in my database, I could recover to 2 hours. Within SRM, I'm limited to the last recovery point.
Yeah.
Say I've got a corruption within my database, and I want to do a failover, I cannot recover to 2 hours from now, just to what I have right now. Point in time recovery.
Yeah. And that's a feature that we're looking at, but we're not really right now promising it for the next version. So the question was about point-in-time recovery, and so that's the answer. Over here on the left.
With the SRAs, I'm familiar with another third-party plugin into
okay.
Virtual Center.
Yep.
I do a lot with Cisco 1000B.
Okay.
Do you know with the SRAs if you're going to be able to tap the APIs for a VMware Update Manager to actually install, pick up the updates like Cisco can like that? They might develop
We don't have immediate plans to do that. I guess that's something we should consider.
It might accelerate updates. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, noted. Cool. So, what you got one? Your plant. Okay, what's your question?
Our reference for VLAN swinging, so kind of like an SRA protector, because in some environments it's actually better to swing over your entire VLAN and not even bother like customization at all.
Do you want to answer it too?
Well, the question is whether or not SRM should support moving the entire VLAN from one side to another instead of maybe spanning VLAN and keeping IP addresses or re-IPing. And there are some changes we are discussing in VMware networking infrastructure which may make possible for us to do things like that for VMware in general. And once these features are available in the platform, SRM can potentially use it. But is your question more along the lines, should we just talk to the switch?
Basically an
Oh, so it's, given that the question comes from an SRM engineer, I will turn it around and ask the audience, is it something SRM users would be interested in, as opposed to customizing, have some integration which allows to access the physical networking infrastructure to accomplish the LAN, VLAN swap. Okay, yeah.
Because afterwards, I was actually going to ask what the best practices were to set networks up to swing back.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, in the short term, you are able to basically run, you know, any sort of command. So if there is already an interface to your switches that you could script, then you could make that part of your recovery plan.
I wonder what this will do to the
work
planned
for you.
failover workflow.
Yeah.
Whether, I mean, if we lose an VLAN on one side, whether or not all aspects of failover are going to be complete in SRM. I guess depends which IP address the SRM server has on the recovery side.
Yeah. It is a hard problem. Any other questions? Okay. Well, great. I hope everyone had a great VMworld, and we'll hopefully see you next year. I forgot. There's one slide. This is a development product, and I always forget this. After the demo, I'm ready to go. If you are interested, if you're a current SRM user and interested in helping us with the next version, either with ideas or we're also doing user interface like interviews and questionnaires. You know, feel free to contact our usability team at this address and just kind of tag it with SRM. We're always looking for people to get their advice and kind of keep feeding it back into the product. So it's a way. It's a way if you had questions maybe that you didn't think of today that you can get back to them. So, okay, thanks. That's it.